welcome to MSNBC.com, Noam Chomsky.
Glad to be with you.
And your new book is called Hegemony or Survival, America's Quest for Global Dominance. And to begin with, let's just establish what it is you're talking about in your book. You're speaking specifically to military dominance and not necessarily sort of commercial McDonald's and Walmart or cultural rock music and blue jeans.
Well, I'm describing the world as it is understood to be, not just by me, but by analysts across the spectrum. In the military dimension, the United States is completely supreme. I mean, it spends virtually as much as the rest of the world combined and is technologically far more advanced and is moving ahead into new domains like militarization of space, which the Bush administration has announced the U.S. must own, not just control. This is being done over the objections of virtually the entire world. So in that dimension, there's no question about U.S. dominance. In other dimensions, it's a much more complex affair. So for years, the world has been economically tripolar, standard term, meaning three major centers of economic power, which are more or less on a par. One is North America, U.S.-based North America. The second is Europe, France and German-based. And the third is Asia, which has now become, especially Northeast Asia, the most dynamic economic region of the world, with a gross domestic product considerably greater than the United States and holding about half the foreign exchange in the world. In fact, the world economy was recently summarized by Laura Tyson, economist who was chair of Clinton's Council on Economic Advisors, writing in Business Week. She summarized it in 4 words. America spends, Asia lends. That's largely true. So economically, the world the U.S. does not dominate the world. Culturally and in other respects, it's a very mixed story. Right. But militarily, there's just no question.
Right. And this person writes, it's not a quest for global dominance, it's maintenance of global dominance. And what's wrong with that anyway? Surely we shouldn't let other countries become a military threat just to be fair.
No, it's a quest for global dominance. The fact that the U.S. has overwhelming military force does not entail that it should dominate the world. We all accept this. So, for example, in Eastern Europe, Russia had overwhelming military force, but we don't conclude from that they should have dominated Eastern Europe. That's a separate question. The specific issue of global dominance has to do with the announcement by the Bush administration in September 2002 that it intended to dominate the world by force, if necessary, and to do so permanently, and to destroy any potential challenge to its domination. That was announced in the National Security Strategy of September 2002. It's not entirely without precedent, but it was quite extreme, and it aroused great anger and hostility and fear throughout the world, including the American foreign policy elite at home. In fact, the first issue right afterwards, the first issue of the main establishment journal, Foreign Affairs, ran an article by a leading international affairs specialist in which he described this as, in his words, a new imperial grand strategy, which he argued would be of considerable danger to the world and to the United States. And that was a pretty standard reaction among the traditional position, and it did arouse much fear and hostility. In fact, Bush succeeded within a year or two in turning the United States into the most feared and in many domains hated country in the world. That's quite an achievement. The Iraq invasion was effectively announced at about the same time, and it was understood by the world and by the U.S. foreign policy elite that the invasion of Iraq was in part simply a demonstration intended to demonstrate that the U.S. intended the doctrine very seriously. It would attack anyone it liked without credible pretext or international authorization. That was, I think, the primary reason for the overwhelming and unprecedented opposition to the invasion throughout the world, including the U.S.
Let's stay with this question. This person writes, what about other countries, citing China? European Union isn't a country, but he goes on to say, do you think that if there was no Pentagon, then the whole world would be a peaceful place and no one would rise to power? Do you at least acknowledge Al-Qaeda's quest? Well, he says quest for hegemony, but you get the idea that,
yeah.
Is it an American thing, or isn't this sort of inherent in how countries play out power plays?
It's first of all, there's no issue of acknowledging, because it's obviously true that there are all kind of monsters all over the world, as there have always been. The question is it inherent? No, not at all. I mean, there's no natural law that required, for example, that Russia dominate Eastern Europe, or that Nazi Germany, which was the main military force, dominate much of Eurasia, or that Britain, in the period of its dominance, should control and virtually destroy India and much of the rest of the world. There's no law about this at all. Just as there's no law that says that the United States must dominate its own backyard, as it's called, and prevent any moves towards independence and democracy, often by violence, leaving the region littered with corpses, terror. Just to take one country that was the target of U.S. terrorist attack in the 1980s, Nicaragua. It has now been reduced after the U.S. took it over again. It's been reduced to the second poorest country in the hemisphere. The most recent reports are that 60% of children under 2 are suffering from severe malnutrition, which may cause permanent brain damage. Something which was not true when the U.S. attacked, and this can be duplicated elsewhere. I mean, these are actions, these are choices, and not laws of nature. And the fact that someone else is carrying out horrifying actions doesn't imply that we should be doing it, or conversely.
Before I forget, the big news, of course, is yesterday, the capture of Saddam Hussein. I wonder if we could get your reaction to that. Some folks have written in asking what you'll do if Saddam reveals his weapons of mass destruction. Would that have an impact on your argument?
First of all, it's not my argument.
Or the argument.
Yeah. That's referring to the conclusion across the political spectrum